Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dagger, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Sam Weinman. Sam is the digital editor of GolfDigest.com, where during his tenure, the website has grown to boast the largest digital audience in golf and has been nominated for several national magazine awards. His new book is Win at Losing: How Our Biggest Setbacks Can Lead to Our Greatest Gains. Welcome to the podcast, Sam, and tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of that self-elevator speech, okay?
Joe, thank you. Yes, happy to be here. Yes, so my background is mostly in sports journalism. I've been at Golf Digest now for about 7 or 8 years. Prior to that, I was in newspapers. I covered hockey and golf primarily for a Gannett newspaper chain. So my interest in this topic in particular, I'm also a father. I coach my kids in sports. I'm an athlete myself. And I had sort of came upon this topic of writing about how people deal with losing really from a personal angle, which was dealing with my boys and how they process loss in various youth sports and a little bit of school and even some sort of relationship type setbacks as well. It was a topic that I was drawn to just from personal experience. From there came a book. So I was, which I'm obviously very happy with.
Was it driven by your own failures or failures that you noticed?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Kind of the running theme I have when I'm talking to my boys was, as athletes, they struggle with losing in all different ways, and they saw it as a real commentary on themselves. And I sort of looked at myself like, God, I had losses every which way, and I'm okay. It actually ended up being a good thing for me, and whether it was in sports or in school or professional setbacks. So a lot of sort of my rudimentary early understanding of the topic began with the idea that losing has been a pretty beneficial thing for me in my life. And, after kind of having that foundation, I wanted to go and talk to experts and people who had really dealt with it on a high profile level.
Well, in the lean world, that's kind of the world that I live in, the lean and, the Six Sigma side. It's all about experimentations,
Sure.
Agile, right? We're all agile anymore, okay? But iterations. And, of course, you may say failure, right? But you write about it on a much larger plane. How do I transfer something like that to maybe smaller lessons?
Well, I think the principles apply to pretty much everything. I mean, they apply to sports. They apply to how you process, small failures in your business life. It applies a little bit to, or not a little bit, but a lot to interpersonal relationship setbacks and things like that, divorces, and it applies to, I don't get into too much into real serious stuff like life tragedies and whatnot. But I do touch upon the fact that there's a lot of principles there that apply, namely in how we frame things that happen to us. Like when something happens to us, whatever it is, and you're given a negative outcome, you have an opportunity now to interpret that in what I call a constructive way. So if in the business world, for instance, if you have an idea that blows up and it you ended up wasting 3 months on it, well, something good came out of it, and it might take you a week or 2 weeks or a year to realize what it was, but there's something there, whether it was life experience that you realize, okay, I don't want to do that again, or it was from all these iterations that we went through, we came up with one thing that happened to stick pretty well, and we're going to go with that. So I say it 100 times, it's as universal a topic as you can get in how we handle setbacks, interpret them, and then use them in a constructive way.
But this isn't a checklist type book, and here's the pattern of what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's kind of a storybook of so I can pull some stories, right?
Yeah, it's funny, a little inside baseball here, but, with my publisher, that was a little bit of a push and pull where their recommendation, and they were dead on, in that people want tangible advice. They want things they can pull from that they can say, you should do X, Y, Z. And my instinct as a writer or a storyteller was to tell stories about people, and from those stories, draw out the parallels to your own life. And I think it really is and if I do my job successfully, and I hope I did, it is seeing parallels between how Michael Dukakis lost the presidential election to 11-year-old Charlie Weinman and how he lost a tennis match. Like, there are straight parallels there in how they dealt with things and use it and frame it in a positive way.
So name me a few of the people you tell the stories about. You mentioned Dukakis there, okay?
Yeah.
You mentioned Charlie Weinman.
Yeah, that was a big part of it, yeah.
It was a big part of it. But
He's a big marquee name. He was a tough interview to get. Yeah, so again, I admittedly draw a lot on sports because sports is such a thing that identifies with me. But one of the points I make is that this is really just the universal experience of disappointment. So I talked to Greg Norman, who, if you don't know golf, was blew the Masters, had a 6-shot lead in the Masters, and on the final round, and lost it in kind of heartbreaking fashion. So he's a classic example of someone who had to sort of deal with failure in a very public, notable way. Dukakis is a presidential election. I even talked to Susan Lucci, who, I don't know if you know that name, but she was a soap opera star for many years, and all my children. I'm not a soap opera guy myself, but she was well known because she was nominated for an Emmy Award 18 straight years and lost every time. And it was kind of this running theme that every year she was nominated for an Emmy Award, she lost, and she actually ended up winning on the 19th time. But she's a great example of someone who dealt with losing in a very dignified and admirable way and actually drew something positive from it. I talked to Fay Vincent, who, if you remember that name, he was the commissioner of baseball in the early 90s, and he was pushed out by the owners. So here's a guy who ascended to arguably the most important job in sports and was basically shown the door in a very arguably humiliating way, and how he dealt with that and moved on and took lessons from it. And then I talked to internet, more your world, is I talked to CEOs of startups and people who go through the experience of trying to launch a business and seeing it blow up in their face, and how they process that disappointment and then took something away from it that helped either see their next idea or shape them as people and building resilience. So that's definitely a story that I identify with. There's a bunch of stories. Not just one more that I'll mention is I talked to the Columbia University football team in the late 1980s. I grew up in New York, so I remember this. They were awful. They lost 44 straight games. So there are guys on that team who showed up as freshmen, graduated as seniors, and did not win a single football game, and were humiliated in the newspapers and was like a running joke nationally. And all these guys, were a great percentage of them, went on to be very successful in life. None of them went on to be successful in football. They all went on to be, lawyers and Wall Street executives and doctors and whatnot. But all of them, to a man, point to that experience as this really formative experience in shaping them and helping them sort of develop the life skills of resilience and delaying gratification, all those things that I think are a big part of the book.
I think of what you just said there, and the idea that popped out at me is I'm going to get my numbers a little bit off here, and you could probably correct me being a golf guy, okay? Right. But like Nicklaus, won his 21 majors or whatever, right. Okay? But he came in second like 60 times or 80 times or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, he won 18 majors. He won 20 if you count amateur majors, but 18 professional majors and finished second 19 times.
Oh, 19.
And
okay.
Yeah, but that's just major championships. He won, finished second a bunch more in regular PGA Tour events. But you're absolutely right. Like, he's a guy that really will point to his losses as part of what made him a great player. It was how to deal with it and what he took away from it. And so that's one part of it. And also just he was a really graceful loser, and congratulating the person who won and recognizing that guy was better than him that day, which I think is a big part of losing as well. There's just sort of the interpersonal dignity you have to show in when things don't go your way.
Yeah. You mentioned names, and a lot of people identify with maybe an older audience when they see the Dukakis and the Norman in there, okay? But what can a younger audience take from the book?
Oh, I think everything. I mean, if anything, this is not a parenting book or a book for kids per se, but in my mind, dealing with losing, again, just talking about Charlie Weinman for a second, an 11-year-old kid he has 3 hockey games this weekend. He's going to probably lose 2 of those games, and he's going to get knocked around, and he's going to have a test. And I deal with it every day, but how he handles poor grades in school and rejection at a personal level, these are all things that he's going to have to develop strategies and how he deals with disappointment. And it's applicable in so many different ways as a kid. And I always say that how you handle, losing in small ways as a kid helps you develop the skills to handle bigger losses later in life. Not getting into college, not getting a job, not getting an account that you want in your career. So I think that it's all there. Like how losing makes us better. We develop insight into our weaknesses when we lose that you might not pick up on when we're successful.
Is that generation different? I mean, you've experienced the older generation, with like we just talked about the Norman, the Dukakis, that age group, and that younger difference. Is there a difference in how they handle failure, you think, or is there?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's funny, Joe. You hear a lot now, and it's kind of a running theme with that kids in sports now. Everyone gets a trophy, and no one's a loser, and we're trying to sort of shield them from failure, which I'm a big believer that's a real mistake, because when you shield kids from disappointment, now maybe a 4-year-old when it's his first experience with sports doesn't need to process loss, but as they get older, dealing with loss is a huge part of it, and realizing that the kid to my right is a little better than me, and the kid to my left is a little bit better than me. That's a healthy thing, and so. You hear about parents who try to, they call them helicopter parents, where they sort of swoop in and try to solve their kids' problems. Well, that's a problem, because, and we're all do it as parents. Like we all want to shield our kids from disappointment, but there ends up being some real negative consequences of that, which is they in turn are not developing the skills they need to, handle disappointment on their own.
Well, I think that's interesting, because when you say that, because one of the things we did as parents when our kids grew up, we were living in this nice neighborhood, didn't have any sidewalks, okay? It seemed a little older and stuff. Really loved the house, okay? But we felt we were missing something, okay?
Sure.
So we decided to move, and we drove around neighborhoods till we saw bicycles laying out in the front yard.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's how we did. That's how we picked our next house.
I love that. Yeah.
And because we wanted kids to grow up in this, what I want to say, this unstructured atmosphere where they weren't coached, so there wasn't adult supervision. We wanted them to play baseball in the backyard or soccer in the backyard and deal with things at their own level. Is that a key for success? I mean, do you think that's a good thing?
I do think so. I mean, I think that as a kid, you're playing, wiffle ball or hoops in the street or touch football. There's constantly a winner or a loser. Like kids are, especially my boys, are uber competitive, and there always has to be a winner and a loser. And sometimes they take it to an extreme because they sort of in that process they lose sight of just the joy of playing, which I think is an important thing. But there's a little bit of a pecking order that things sort themselves out a little bit. And in a small way, I feel like those little competitions they have can be profoundly impactful on how they handle disappointment when they're now in organized little league and then high school baseball, whatever the thing is. You have some basic coping skills that you develop over time because you have a history of, okay, I've done this before. I've lost and I've gotten up and I've been okay. I mean, again, I talk about myself like in every realm of sports, just like I play a lot of tennis. I play a lot of golf, and I'm okay, but I'm not great at any of them. But I like it because I put myself out there, I lose, and from that I get the opportunity to correct where my weaknesses are. And I feel like, and these are all unstructured sports. I'm not playing for any money. God help us if we were. I just handle.
Oh, you got to be playing a little skin there in the game, isn't there?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I play for that kind of money. I play for it, but my livelihood doesn't depend on it. But my point is that it's just that's a big part of sort of handling disappointment is even on these little small ways of how we handle competition, even in the backyard.
Well, and I thought of that, when we before this, is because I always thought one of the defined moments of my one son's career, okay, Peter, was when we were in the backyard and I was at the kitchen window and they were having squirt gun battles with those. What was the water blaster things?
Super soak.
The super soakers. Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
having one, and it came and he cornered the guy at the gate who was the big sports guy,
Right.
the cool guy and everything
Right.
that you always have. And the guy said, "Peter, don't you dare pull that trigger." And I looked and I had the window open. I looked. I said, "Well, this is going to be a defining moment in this kid's life, I think here." Okay.
Right.
And I waited there a second. And all at once I saw the trigger pulled and the squirt gun, and I said, "I'm getting out of here. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but
Right.
we're going to see how he handles this." Okay.
Sure. Sure.
And I don't know if it turned out well or not for him. There wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of discussion, but those are the types of things that I think that kids need. They need those unstructured moments, okay, to be able to grow. Is there any truth in that? In your experience?
Absolutely, completely. And I think it's like, again, that whole idea of helicopter parenting, which is this idea that we're gonna swoop in here and we're gonna avoid this messy situation because we don't want the big guy to get soaked, and we don't want our kid to be in a position where the big guy is mad, and so we're gonna shield everyone from this awkward situation. And in a way, one of my arguments is no, don't shy from these moments, because these messy moments are also very teachable moments. And of course, you want to make sure everyone's safe when you're talking about your kids, and everyone's treating each other with respect, and because I'm a big believer in that as well. But things need to get messy on occasion, because from that come opportunities for just to learn from it.
Well, one of the things you're a digital guy, right?
Okay. To an extent, supposedly, yes.
Yeah, you understand the internet, all right?
Yes.
The other part of it is you understand youth. Done a lot of youth coaching and things like
Yeah.
that. And as we mentioned before the podcast briefly, my son has played at a pretty high level in eSports.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's continuously failure in game getting better. But even, as he always said, you never know how good you are till you go online, okay,
Right,
and
right.
play against the other people out there. The amount of what I would call, he calls it cancerous behavior, okay, and
Right.
internet thugs and that
Sure.
type of stuff. I'm amazed that they have that resilience to keep coming
Yeah.
up. Is that just special for that, or does
No,
or is
sorry.
it the kids at that age getting accustomed to be able to build that resilience?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the themes of the book, is that's a little bit of a myth out there, that resilience is something that you just have and you don't have. Like, Joe, you're a resilient guy, I'm not. Like that's a mistake. That everyone has the ability to be resilient, and it's something that you cultivate, and it's something it's like a muscle that you build. And one of the themes, or one of the findings of the book, is that sort of the more practice you get in developing that, facing resistance, dealing with it, dealing with guys you don't like, and having to show back up, or whatever the form is, that it's like a muscle that gets stronger. The more opportunities you have to put yourself in a situation where you have to be resilient, the better off you're going to be long term, because then you can draw on that.
I always try to think of how in esports, especially in the digital world, there seems to be, you can say anything when you're hiding behind a typewriter. There's not that personal contact, right?
Right.
But today in the business world, it is also a lot you can hide behind that typewriter. I mean, the flaming on Twitter, okay, or on Facebook, or this election is famous for it, okay?
100%.
Of what the comments. We've never had such a vocal, I would say, opinions on.
Yeah, it's a polarizing time.
Yeah, it's a polarizing time, exactly. How does your book and that winning at failure help that polarization? Does it? I mean, does it help you understand it better at all?
I think so. I mean, I think I've certainly been thinking a lot about the election since and how it relates to my book. And one of the things that I've thought about, or one of the sort of common themes of the book, is every disappointment requires introspection. It requires you to look inside and take inventory of sort of what you did or didn't do. And I think that there's a little bit of one of the things the internet is famous for is sort of just throwing blame at other people. And I think that's really cancerous. I feel like just throwing your frustrations out at other people can be really counterproductive. And not to say that there aren't opportunities to be frustrated with outside forces, but I've looked at the election like, okay, what did I miss about this? What can I learn from it in terms of how people think and how I look at the world? And so I've made it sort of double down on this point of taking sort of a self-inventory of how I can be better. And especially in my mind, because it's such a polarizing time, I've decided I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of that sort of collective dissension out there. So I want to be someone who helps bridge gaps. So the book, in my mind, talks a lot about being honest with yourself and looking at where you can be better. And I think that's something that we could all stand to do right now. And especially like you said about people's behavior on the internet. I bet a lot of people who are spewing a lot of the hate on the internet right now are the people who would really benefit from taking a good look at themselves and asking, what they could do to be contributing in a positive way as opposed to a negative way.
I want to mention the part about going back to gaming a little bit. Is my son there got kicked from a team that was invited to a big tournament. Mm-hmm. He created a team, and they fell short of getting a direct invite, so they had to go through qualifiers. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he flew. He was getting ready. He was going to fly over there without an invite, and if you get an invite, you get your trip paid for. Okay,
right.
And he's going to Sweden. All right,
very cool.
to DreamHack, and he and I said to him, and this is like between his sophomore and junior year of college. Mm-hmm. And I tell him, okay, I said, if this trip, you're spending your savings right now to take this trip, okay, mm-hmm. and if you don't make it, you're going to come home, and the priority college is going to rise a little bit because you're going to have mm-hmm. to answer to me.
Right.
Okay. And he goes, yeah. I said, do you understand that? He goes, yeah. I got it. I said, okay. I said, you're willing to do that, huh? He says, yeah, I need to. Okay, I need to prove to myself that I can do it. He goes over, his plane gets canceled. His plane is he gets there with no sleep. Mm-hmm. Okay, plays through these 1-game qualifiers.
Right.
All right, which is just torturous. Okay, it's unbelievable what you go through in this big room of computers. It's the biggest LAN event in the world, to give you an idea.
Wow.
Okay, but through all these computers and stuff, he gets to the final game. He loses.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
Right.
And I mean, he hasn't slept for like 48, 60 hours or something at this point. Okay. It's like, no wonder you lose and stuff. And, of course, my heart is just sinking for him, right?
Right.
I can't watch the qualifiers, but I can, I get to see the results.
Right.
And so he did it. So they go through the invite and the tournament happens, and then they have a all-star tournament afterwards.
Uh-huh.
And I believe he was the only person selected in they formed like six or eight teams to play in this all-star event. It was all picks and everything. And I believe he was the only person, my memory serves me right, picked out of the non-qualified team.
Wow.
Okay.
Very cool.
He got to play. His team won the all-star tournament.
How about that?
And the next week is when he signed with an organization with a sporting contract. Okay, and became a member of what I would call, a larger team.
Right.
And what I and to me, that was like, what was in that? I mean, that's a failure that's just about unbelievable to be able to bounce from, right?
Sure. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think a couple things that thought to my head is that there's a quote that I love. I'm a big hockey guy. It's Wayne Gretzky's quote is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that applies to pretty much anything. So your son's decision to go over there and pay for his own trip, and even though he wasn't assured, was him taking a bit of a risk. And at some point, he made the calculation in his head that, okay, I'm willing to take that risk because the benefits of what could happen outweigh the possible disappointments. And he realized he probably, in his own mind, in a small way, probably made the calculation. Okay, if it doesn't work out, I'll be okay. I'll get over it. There'll be I might be bummed out, but he took a risk knowing that it was worth it and it pays off. And that's, one of the things that I try to stress in the book is that it's not so much about just how you deal with failure on the back end when something doesn't go your way. It's also when you're throwing yourself into something, you need to make that calculation that don't be so afraid of it not working out, because something good is going to come from it. It might work out perfectly, which is obviously the optimal outcome, but even if it doesn't work out perfectly, you're going to take something positive away from whatever risk you're taking or venture you're throwing yourself into or game you're playing.
So win at losing isn't just about learning from your mistakes. We need to learn from our winning too, right?
Yeah, completely. It's two-sided. Again, like it's one of these things where it's not just reactive, it's sort of proactive, which is that ideally people will come away feeling emboldened because they'll feel like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try, because if it doesn't work out, there's something that's gonna be good about it. And then the other side of it is, like you said, it's a little bit about winning. It sounds almost counterintuitive, but don't be deceived by success either. As much as we don't want to be totally bummed out by our failures, I'm also a big believer that when things go swimmingly great, don't overvalue that either. There might be something that just bounced your way, or it might be hiding a larger flaw. And so there's a whole belief that success can be in some ways counterproductive, which I realize is weird, in the sense that you don't develop the skills that you need to develop because things have just gone your way so far, and you point to success as validation of your talent, when really you want to look at success as a validation of your effort and your hard work.
I think of these sports guys that are, let's say, even in eSports, but even in baseball or basketball,
totally, that
are the stars, but never win a championship.
Yeah.
Okay. And what is the definition of success, maybe? Okay.
Right.
You got a thing. It's like they really hold that championship, that team effort so great.
Yeah.
But they're only 1/5 of the puzzle, right?
Sure.
So
well, yeah. Go ahead.
So how does that help in the book? Because I mean, you don't talk so much about teams. You talk a lot about individuals there.
Right. Like certainly from a team standpoint, I talk a lot about a team loses 2 games over the weekend. I guarantee you that practice on Monday night will be their most productive practice. Because suddenly everything comes into focus of what they need to be better. We didn't do this well enough. We didn't do that well enough. Well, we're going to work on those 2 things. So from a team standpoint, as a coach, I always find that you always have kids' attention on the aftermath of failure, in the aftermath of losing, because suddenly it's crystallized in their mind. Oh yeah, we're not that good. We actually do need to work on this. Whereas, they win 2 games over the weekend, suddenly they're not really interested in practicing that hard because they've got it all figured out. Everything's going great. So certainly that's one part of how the sort of lessons of the book apply, which is that, losing helps really illuminate the areas that you need to address the most.
I have to ask you this because you brought that up about the teams, and and I thought you made some good points there. But in eSports, okay, you're governed by the 5 guys on the team really dictate most of that.
Yeah.
The coaching is not has any real decision making within the team.
Right.
Okay. So you have whatever the age, from 16 to 24 to even there's a few 27-year-old guys out there, but not many, that really govern the team, manage a team. And when losing occurs, it's really difficult in eSports to keep teams together.
What? How so? Just in the sense that there becomes sort of infighting, or
there's infighting, and one guy gets kicked because it's always some other guy's issue, right?
Right.
And and you think needs to be some maturity within a team, and that's an old guy talking.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm not sure, but from your experience and looking at these different failures and things like that, that cohesiveness of a team. Is that really something you got to go through failures and learn to grow as a team?
I do. I feel like certainly the teams that go through adversity in some form or another end up being much stronger in the long run. When things go great right from the start, it's obviously an easy time, but they're not really learning anything about each other's character. Whereas when a team, you hear these stories about teams that lose championships one year and then come back to win it the next year. Well, that's often a function of they grew from the losing experience. I mean, the classic example that I reference in the book is the Chicago Bulls when they were in the late 80s. They lost in the conference finals to the Detroit Pistons every year. And, part of the reason that they became the dominant team that they became was because of the fact that they learned from that loss and then went on to win and realized that it was sort of such a character-shaping experience for all of them.
But I'll go back and I want to challenge that a little bit because they switch players, they switch moments and stuff. With that, it was not only growing as a team, but also finding other pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's what happens maybe a little quicker in esports, but you're still looking for them other pieces to fit better, okay? And it's that core group, the Pippen, the Jordan, okay?
Sure.
That stayed together, but they were always constant flux, it seems, in the other 2 or 3 positions. Is that, and so...
Yeah.
Where does that fit? I mean, is there any truth to that, or?
Sure. I mean, ultimately what happens is, you make improvements or you address flaws in your game. So from the team standpoint, like those Bulls teams had some. I'm trying to think about those teams, but they had some guys who were weak in the middle, so they got rid of those guys, and so the Bulls benefited from that experience because they sort of were able to sift through flaws in their lineup and identify where they needed to be stronger. But it also helped guys like Jordan and Pippen and say, okay, well, I need to be a better teammate. I need to help bring these guys along more because if I don't bring them along, we're not going to be better in the end. So those losses help shape them. The other side of course, is there was some guy on that team that I talk a little bit about this in the book too, which is like there are guys who were on those late 80s teams that got kicked to the curb. What happens to those guys? Well, those guys benefited from the experience as well, not in the most tangible ways where they won championships, but they probably said, well, I got, the Bulls cut me this year. What can I take away from it? Where was I coming up short? How was I not contributing? And how can that hopefully make me a better player for the next team I play for?
Yeah, but I think I'm going to throw something out there, but I think it maybe was more about Jordan and Pippen learning. Okay,
sure.
Because those cast of characters, I hardly remember the cast of characters that they went through. And I'm sure Bulls fans will call me out. I mean, there's Rodman, Kerr, but who was the point guard that Kerr substituted for? I don't remember. So I think it may be a lot about that core and what they learned and how to deal with the others and bring them in.
Of course. I mean, again, there's no question that, and Jordan talks about it a lot. I use Jordan in sort of 2 different ways in the book, but certainly a big part of sort of him becoming the player he became was from earlier failures he had, both, as a high school player getting cut from his varsity, which is a famous story, but also when he was with the Bulls and they were losing every year to the Pistons, he had to take a look at those teams and be like, God, what are they doing right that we're not doing? And what can we take away from that and learn from it?
No, I think you're so right. I apologize. I've ran over. I could go on and on, Sam, with you. I think there's some great stories there. And the book is full of stories. It's a nice, comfortable read, but it's another one that I think you'll go back and in the old days, we'd tear out a couple pages, okay? Or at least dog-ear them, all right? Because I think it's got some great points in it that you'll reread and carry around for a while to reinforce a few of the ideas. So what's upcoming for you? And tell me where they can find the book and a little bit if there's a book site or anything. Yeah,
well, the book is called Win It Losing. You can get it on
Can you show it to me?
Oh, yeah, I have it right here.
You got a copy?
Oh, just conveniently happens to be here.
Okay.
There's the copy. So that's just an early copy of it. But yes, Win It Losing, it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, your local bookstore. Also, samweinman.com is you can learn all about the book and me as well. I hope it out talking to people about this topic for a while because I feel like it's, in addition to wanting to sell books, I feel like it's a hugely valuable sort of lesson that people can benefit from, which is that losing has great opportunities in it.
I encourage people to read it because my first read through it, I sat through it, I said, oh, that's a pretty good book. But then it was like, God, what was that story? And I remembered and I went back to it. So that was
great.
That was kind of cool because I wanted to go back to it a couple times. A good sign of a book that it just doesn't end up on the shelf and collect dust back there. Okay?
I hope so. That's good. Yeah, I'd like to see people come back to it.
So, okay, Sam, I would like to thank you very much. This podcast will be available in the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So thanks all the listeners for listening. Thank you, Sam.
Take care, Joe. Thank you.